Hello and welcome to Ukraine Beyond the Lines with Zarina Zabrisky. We are bringing you reports from the site and the latest from the war in Ukraine. Make sure to please subscribe to our channel and give us a like so more people can hear the reports.
I'm at the epicenter. That's the place where the refugees or internally displaced people arrive from Zaporizhzhia areas that are already occupied by the Russians. And behind me you see a tiny little car that waited 5 days to get here. To the relative safety of Zaporizhzhia. And the gentleman just spoke to me. He's a sailor and he's now stays at Bucha. He said, when I asked him, is his family safe? He said, where is it safe right now in Ukraine?
A convoy of cars is arriving on 40 degrees Celsius today with children and dogs in tow, car after car. On August 21st, a woman died waiting in line at a checkpoint in Vasilevka. She was one of nearly 4,000 people in line at the checkpoint to leave the Russian-occupied territories. Overall, this summer, 11 people have already died in this line. As the cars pull in, the air raid siren sounds. The last few days, the shelling of Zaporizhzhia city and the region intensified. Many civilians are reported dead and injured.
Now, Zarina, you seem to have migrated all the way to the east-north of Ukraine, almost to the Belarusian border. Where are you now and why?
Hi, Claudia. Hi, everyone. I'm greeting you about 40 kilometers from Chornobyl nuclear power plant, waiting for the pass to get into the nuclear power station. So right now in Slavutych, it's really hard to get this pass. And so I'm staying in the satellite town, which is basically a service station for the nuclear power plant. So I'm waiting here to get on the train to go to Chernobyl power plant, except for it's not working at the moment, like many things in Ukraine, because of the war, because the train used to go through Belarusian territory. And it doesn't anymore because Belarus has joined the Russian Federation, even unofficially, by parking the military equipment and a lot of personnel on its territory. So instead of taking a train, I will have to take a bus that takes about 6 hours to get there.
I wish you good luck on that 6-hour bus ride. But Zarina, tell me, what are you doing in the satellite town?
Well, I'm interviewing the Chernobyl plant personnel, employees who worked at the plant during the occupation. For instance, the other day, I spoke to one man, the head of the electric department, who was about to leave to go home in the morning when the war started on the February 24th. And so he saw Russian tanks outside of his work window arriving to the station. The guards that were protecting the plant only had the machine guns and they couldn't resist. And so the station was captured almost right away. And the longest shift at Chernobyl, which lasted for a month, started then. But the people who came to change this shift were as heroic because they already knew that they would be working in the Russian captivity, basically at gunpoint with very little food, sleeping at their workplaces. And it was very intense. So they are very modest. They insist that they are not heroes. And they just have very high sense of responsibility and duty. Hopefully next week, though, I will be able to move on to Chernobyl power plant itself, obtain the documents, and get you the footage of the infamous town of Pripyat, the abandoned town that everybody had to leave in 1986 when the accident happened. And hopefully I'll share more stories of the Russian occupation at the station, including digging trenches in the radioactive forest by the Russian soldiers. That happened. So next time.
How comes they have to work there? Isn't the station closed after the explosion of 1986?
A great question and a major misconception. The nuclear reactor, actually, that exploded at the time was buried and still is buried under a giant concrete sarcophagus called Ark that was reinforced several times since then. But the station's remaining power units only stopped producing electricity in around 2000s, early 2000s. And currently, the station is not producing any electricities, but there are two storages for the spent nuclear fuel, the wet and the dry, they're called. And it's always undergoing a reaction. It's like a gigantic refrigerator that always needs to be plugged into electricity, always needs to be powered, because if the fuel is not cooled down, it can explode. It could release the radioactive substance that will lead to a leak and the contamination of the environment. And that's what these people need to maintain and keep in good order. And that's why their psychological condition and their physical state are so important. Working in captivity is not really a good idea. The mayor of Slavutych, whom I interviewed, when the journalist asked him, when will be the end of this situation of Chernobyl? He answers, never, because it takes about 100,000 years for this reaction to stop, for uranium basically to stop being uranium. In about 200, 300 years, another engineer told me, it will stop being as dangerous as it is now, but not during our lifetime at all. So a lot of personnel is working there to maintain safety. Most of this personnel lives in Slavutych in between shifts, and that's why I got so many interviews here. It's also a great city, and Russians tried to capture it during the occupation. They besieged it for several weeks, and there was no water, no power, Claudia, no heat. They had to cook food outside on fire and melt snow to get some water. But when the Russians entered the city, when the troops were here, everybody stepped out and basically pushed the Russian troops out of town unarmed. And this is something to be remembered. The mayor of Slavutych told me the story of how he was captured by the Russian soldiers and what he did to negotiate the city out of Russian captivity.
On March 26, 2022, Russian troops entered Slavutych, Chernobyl's satellite town. Several thousand residents filled the streets, and they shouted, "Slavutych is Ukraine. Murderers, occupants, go home, and glory to Ukraine."
У нас было 3 дня боев в округе города, когда наши защитники, наша территориальная оборона защищала город и пыталась не пустить врага на эту территорию. К сожалению, мы потеряли 4 наших бойцов во время защиты города. Несколько человек также попали. До 26-го мне удалось вывести свою семью за пределы города. У меня маленькая дочка. В тот день ей было как раз 2 года ровно. Я ночевал не в Славутиче, а в деревне рядом с городом и въезжал в город рано утром для того, чтобы мы провели все вместе мирную акцию протест. На въезде в город меня остановило несколько военных в форме. Я понял, что это не украинские военные. Меня остановили, попросили выйти из машины, обыскали, связали руки за спиной, забрали телефон, забрали машину и отвели с связанными за спиной руками в лес, где уже было несколько человек, которых также остановили на подъезде к городу. Они не знали, что я мэр города, они останавливали всех, кто въезжал, так как планировали зачистку, военную зачистку Славутича для того, чтобы войти в город. Услышав о том, что готовится зачистка, я раскрыл себя, сказал, что я мэр города и защищать в городе нечего, потому как я точно знаю информацию, что военных в городе не осталось. И потребовал встречи с их командиром. Был диалог, что здесь нет вооруженных сил, здесь нет военных, здесь мирные люди, которые спасали весь мир от чернобыльской трагедии. Напомнил о том, что отправлял переговорщиков, чтобы мы сдали город и не вели бои, но мы его не послушали и создали сопротивление. Услышал ответ о том, что военные не сдаются, и мы морально не имели такого права без боя сдать город, поэтому был дан бой. Но мирными жителями мы не прикрываемся, и сейчас люди вышли на мирную акцию протеста. Высказал сомнение о том, что среди них есть люди с оружием, которые будут стрелять по русским солдата предложил поехать вместе к митингующим, и я выйду первым, чтобы собой прикрывать их. Если буду стрелять, то будут стрелять в меня, чтобы они убедились, что оружия на площади нет. Поехали к людям, которые в это время уже вытеснили российские войска к окраине города. Собралось все население Slavutych. Когда я выходил с русского броневика, в котором мы приехали, это было просто потрясающе. Несколько тысяч славутчан, которыми я безумно горжусь, вышли на улицу и высказали свое мнение о том, что Slavutych – это украинский город. Русские военные убедились в том, что оружия нет, и уехали за пределы города.
Deoccupation ensued in the following days, and Russian troops retreated from the Chernobyl nuclear power plant territory, Slavutych and Chernihiv Oblast.
Now, Zarina, you seem to be lured to nuclear sites, which I'm not sure is a good thing. You were just in Zaporizhzhia a couple of weeks ago, and today the mission of the International Atomic Energy Agency is supposed to arrive there. Am I correct?
It is a really important thing that the agency indeed arrived to Kyiv, following the guidelines by the Ukrainian government, as they insisted for the agency to arrive through the Ukrainian-controlled territory. Notably, though, among the 13 state members that will be on this mission, the United States and the United Kingdom's not on the list because Russia considers them unfriendly, quote unquote. The reason I'm saying that it's a good sign that the agency might be impartial because Russia, of course, is one of the major contributors to the agency's fund. And there are quite a number of important employers of Russian origin from Rosatom in the top management of the agency.
Okay, now I really feel like they're following you because were you not just in Kyiv? Now, we missed you there, but could you tell us a little bit about what we should know?
The reason I was in Kyiv was it was a very important date. Here I am for the importance of the place. There I was for the importance of the date. It was the 31st anniversary of Ukraine's independence from the Soviet Union and from Russia. It was such a big holiday. The last year when I was here, there was a lot of fireworks, celebration. Of course, not this year, because it was also the 6 months since the start of the war. And there was still a big, well, we can say celebration downtown. Because there was an installation of burned and destroyed Russian equipment, tanks and armored machines, and people were dancing around them, taking selfies, and children were climbing upon them. So it felt as if it was a victory already, and the war was left behind. It was quite an ingenious move. It really lifted the morale, Claudia. Hi, happy Independence Day, everyone. Happy Independence Day, Ukraine. I am reporting from Kherson, the main street of Kyiv. And in fact, my camera, my phone is right now based on the broken Russian tank. So glory to Ukraine, glory to heroes. And I will be bringing you more from today when the bravest people in the capital of Ukraine gathered on the main street while the air raids are blasting the whole day. There are reports of multiple explosions all around the country and reports of different railway stations being mined everywhere, including Lviv and Vinnytsia and some other quite peaceful cities. This is something you don't see every day. I am not an expert on military equipment, so I won't be able to tell you which type of Russian tank or other military equipment that is. Some of them are burned and in a quite poor state, and overall is one of the most impressive conceptual art installation that I have ever seen. And it just goes on and on and on. And people are here enjoying the summer day and the summer breeze. It's very nice and warm. This particular truck says Slava Ukraini, which means glory to Ukraine, and the habitual answer is Geroyam Slava, which means glory to heroes. And this piece is particularly ugly and damaged. It kind of has the feel of the war itself. Just look at it. And this exhibit has been going on and on and on. And looking at all this, you will get a sense that maybe all of this is in the past, but it is not so. Like this particular vehicle says here, there's a little graffiti saying Nikopol, and just today and every night before that, Nikopol was bombed, and there are multiple victims every night among civilians, and it keeps going. Just today, like I mentioned before, we had several air raids, sirens. This is a particularly interesting piece. I don't know what it is, but it's been really burned down. And I think it still smells this burned weapon smell, which I have learned being here since March. Again, it's quite hard to think that the war is not over. You think that Ukraine already won the war, and most people that I spoke to believe that it's just a matter of time. And just walking down the street like this, you become more hopeful, more optimistic, and can't help but admire the good spirits, the stoicism, and the defiance of people who, instead of hiding somewhere in dark, quiet places, step out dressed up with their kids and celebrate life, even though the aggressor has invaded their country and continues to blow up the civilian infrastructures and simply the land, simply the country. Here to the right you see a gigantic poster to Azovstal Free Mariupol. Azovstal Free Mariupol defenders, and this is very meaningful because in a few days there will be a trial, they say, a tribunal, they call it, in Mariupol, in a Philharmonic Society hall, where the Russians are currently building cages, human cages, and where the basements are being equipped for about 2,000 of Ukrainian soldiers who are kept prisoners of war. There were 189 air raids in Ukraine that day, and 8 in Kyiv only. And I listened to every one of them. It was non-stop howling. And the air raid can't stop anyone. The holiday, as many experts and officials said, has marked the turning point in this war.
How so? Do you mean the counteroffensive in the south of Ukraine that many outlets are reporting on today?
Well, we are not going to say anything about the counteroffensive, anything definite at least, for sure, because the Ukrainian authorities have asked for the silent mode. And the reason they do so is because during the hybrid war, any information can interfere with the military operations. There are as many opinions as there are experts, and we don't need one more for sure, Claudia. But what I can say, because I have traveled all around the country, and especially around the south of Ukraine, I've watched people and I spoke to people, and despite the nightly shelling of Mykolaiv, for instance, over 24 hours, last 24 hours, there were about 20 people killed. We're still waiting for the confirmation for the numbers. The majority of people still don't want to leave the city. They want to fight back. In occupied Kherson, the resistance movement is going on strong. And in occupied Zaporizhzhia Oblast, people are trying to escape the Russian occupied territory and get to the Ukrainian controlled area, even though they have to drive for hours through minefields and they're risking death there. So morale is really, really high. I interviewed so many, including one former soldier from Zaporizhzhia who fought the battle for the nuclear plant there. He told me step by step how the fight was unrolling and how they were outnumbered by the Russian troops who arrived in tanks, and the Ukrainian National Guard managed to burn one tank and destroy the other, even though they were armed with just machine guns. At the end of the battle, they still had to surrender, though.
Okay, Zarina, thank you very much for that. That was at the beginning of March, and since then, the shelling of the biggest nuclear power plant never stopped. Can you tell us a little bit more about what is going on there now?
Right. Well, the station was shelled today, just this morning, and the roof of one of the buildings was destroyed. Yesterday, the satellite town of Zaporizhzhia power plant called Energodar was shelled, and some residential buildings were burned and some cars were damaged. And the residents of this town are leaving en masse to the territories controlled by Ukraine, as I have mentioned. Towns across the river are being shelled by the Russian troops on a daily basis, and there are many casualties, unfortunately, including children. Russia and Ukraine exchange accusations for the first time in history. That might be one of the most important things to point out. The station was completely de-energized, which is extremely dangerous, as we have discussed in the first part of the show. A similar situation with the spent nuclear waste that at Chernobyl can happen here. Plus, the core reactor, which is working here, unlike the power unit at Chernobyl, might melt if it is not cooled properly. Remember the refrigerator I mentioned before? So here we come again. It needs to be working at all times. It needs to be plugged in. It needs to be connected to the electric line always. And so basically we can say, going back to refrigerator, so whoever owns the keys to the apartment can decide how to connect to power. And the Russian militaries want to disconnect the Zaporizhzhia power plant from the Ukrainian grid and connect it to the Russian one. It used to be the same network during the Soviet times, but by now they're completely different. So it's technically difficult because they operate at different frequencies. And in order to make such a switch, the Russians need to stop the plant completely, just switch it off, and then switch it to their frequency. But that is extremely dangerous. And because without the power, the fridge doesn't work. The reactor core is going to overheat and explode. So let's hope that the International Atomic Energy Agency will do its duty, which is recommend the right thing, be impartial, ask for the demilitarization of the plant that so many parties, Claudia, including the US government, suggest.
Сегодня становится новый вызов – провокационные обстрелы оккупантами Российской Федерации, страной-агрессором, атомной электростанции, самой большой в Европе, в городе Энергодар. Это может привести к техногенной катастрофе, которая накроет не только Запорожскую область. Это накроет и страны, которые находятся на границе с Украиной. Считаю, что абсолютно неэффективно ведет себя МАГАТЭ. Не лоббировать интересы страны-агрессора, а проводить жесткую, согласно своего устава, жесткую политику и осуждение, и конкретные реальные действия для моей страны в плане защиты от ядерной катастрофы. Организация Объединенных Наций тоже обязана максимально проявить внимание. В радиусе 50 километров вокруг Энергодара должна быть полностью очищена от любых боевых действий. Порядка 100 тысяч нам придется спасать сразу же, это в радиусе 50 километров вокруг Запорожской атомной электростанции. Мы свою работу сделаем точно. А какую работу сделает международная организация? МАГАТЭ, Организация Объединенных Наций. Чем вы будете заниматься? Красный Крест. В тот момент, когда русские, российские оккупанты здесь, на нашей территории, пытаются устроить мировую техногенную катастрофу. Где будете вы в этой проблеме?
We will check in on that. next time when we meet. Hopefully there will be some news about counteroffensive as well. And well, right now I'm sitting in front of the burned cars that were here since the Russians tried to capture the town of Slavutych. But hopefully next time I'll be able to show you some of Chernobyl.
Thank you so much for that very detailed explanation, Zarina, and thank you very much for speaking with us today. And I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thank you, Claudia. Thank you, everybody. And subscribe to Bywire Beyond the Lines.